Okay, so before we install the valves in this head, we need to install the valve seals. But before we do the seals, we need to install the new seats that come with this high-performance spring set I got. I'm using a spring set from SuperTech. So it's springs, titanium retainers, and then it has some seats that need to go in. It looks like they might actually fit over the seals. I can check it real quick. But sometimes these are captured by the seals, the spring seats. So you got to make sure you install those before you put the seals on. These ones look like they might just be able to drop in there. So we'll see. So there's 8 of these, so obviously they go on the exhaust side. I'm going to open up my little valve seals. I'll just see if they drop through there. Yeah, they drop through. So they don't really need to go in first. I got these seals from Tectonics Tuning. It's a heavy-duty exhaust valve stem seal, which is, I believe, made of Viton. So a little bit higher heat rubber on those seals. And then their intake ones are heavy-duty too, but some other material. They've been in this game for a long time. They know what they're doing, so I trust their parts. I'm going to find in my little set here. So this set I used to remove the seals previously when I was disassembling the head. It also comes with a driver basically to put the new seals in. And I'm just going to see if there's one here that seems like it'll work good. So 6mm. Don't really like the surface finish on these cheap things. I might try the 5.5 just to see if it actually still fits. Yeah, I like that one better, I think. Nope, it doesn't sit all the way down on the seat. So I'm going to have to use the 6. Maybe I'll put a little oil on this just so it doesn't screw up the seal at all. So basically this tool has a little guide on it, and then it's got a little counter bore that sits down on the metal part of the seal, and that's what you can drive it in with. And these don't take a whole lot of pressure to get in. Man, I don't like the way that one sits either. So it doesn't look like I'm going to have a tool that works well with these valve seals. So I'm going to have to come up with something else. Maybe I can find a little socket or something that fits those just right. Okay, so I found out that a 10mm socket fits these valve stem seals just perfectly. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking a little bit of oil on a Q-tip. I'm oiling up the ID a little bit, and then I'm using my valve stem pliers to grab these just to get them started. They have nice little grooves that grab the lip that's on that little seal. So I'm using those just to get them started real gently. And then I'm using my 10mm socket just to push them on the rest of the way. Make sure they're seated. These are really easy to install, actually. easier than the lock. Pretty straightforward, pretty hard to screw it up. Just make sure you're not pushing on the rubber with anything and that you're getting them on straight. So I'm going to keep going, getting all these on, and then we'll come back and here, let me show you. So those go right onto the end of the guide. And then I'm using the 10mm socket just to make sure they're pushed on all the way. And they have a nice little seat that they sit on. So it's pretty straightforward. They drop right into place and it's kind of hard to screw it up. So I'm going to keep going, keep putting all these on, and then we'll come back and we'll get some valves in this thing and be ready to put some springs and retainers back in it. Okay, so all the valve stem seals are in the right holes. Just trying to drop some valves into the corresponding numbered positions that we labeled before. I'm just going to give these a quick wipe down before I put them in, just to make sure there's nothing on them. Alright, so there we go. Looks pretty good for stock valves and just a little bit of work pretty much. Well, quite a bit of work actually, but you know, nothing you guys can't do yourselves. So, you know, one of the things that I was having trouble with was when I was trying to show you guys that install tool, I was having trouble getting it to actually work and install the keepers. And I think the reason why is that the valves were pushing down until they, you know, hit the table, I guess. So they'd probably come down about that far, which is probably too much for it to compress and still be able to install the keeper. So the spring would bottom out before the keeper would be able to get into the grooves. So I'm going to have to figure out something to put in underneath these cylinders in the combustion chamber to hold those valves up and then clamp it down to the table. So I'm going to figure something out and I'll be back. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm just folding these blue shop towels up, folding them in half and half again. And then kind of folding them same this direction. And then I'm just going to kind of stick them in here like that. So I'm going to do all four of these, and then I'm just going to put a piece of tape across it to hold them, and then I'll flip the head over and stick it on there. And clamp it down to the table. I think that should give us enough to push against so that valve can't drop out too far. Hopefully. Can't seem to push the valves down too far, so hopefully that works good. Alright, so I'm going to get my spring compressor set up again, and then we'll go about installing these valve springs and retainers. Alright guys, so all in all, this tool is pretty cool. It's a little finicky, but it's still way easier than trying to fiddle the keepers in yourself. So I've got 3 exhaust valve done here. I haven't started on the intake yet, but I was just going to show you how to do one of these with this tool. So I'm taking the little seat and I'm sticking it in the spring that it's supposed to seat. I'm dropping that in the exhaust valve hole, and then there's another spring. So there's like a main spring and a helper spring. It's probably how they get the more pressure without you know, having a huge spring. Titanium retainer, and then this guy. Let's see if I can show you guys a close-up here. So, can you see that? There's like two little counter bores where your keepers, they sit right in there. Make sure you have them face the right direction, obviously. So the taper goes towards the top. And then you have this little thing with guides that you just stick on there and it captures them. So now they're just sitting in there. And this plunger is spring loaded. So as you push the valve retainer down and the valve stem stays up in there, the idea is that those keepers just kind of fall into place, and then when you pull it out, the retainer comes up and captures them, and then the tool can come out without it. Basically, it just installs them for you. Like I said, it's still a little cumbersome, a little finicky. It's not a perfect science, for sure, but like I said, it's way, way easier than installing them by hand. So getting them to go in, see, that one went right in. So it drops the keepers right into the hole. Pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Like I said, not perfect. I had to fiddle around with the first few. But all in all, I think it's worth the money. It's about 125 bucks for this thing, but and then about another 125 or so for this spring compressor setup. And I do think that having the rags in the combustion chambers is helping. But yeah, this is typically a lot more difficult because you have to put grease on these, and then you'd have to compress that down and somehow hold it while you're trying to kind of put the keepers into the grooves and have some grease on them to make them stick. And it's always a pain in the ass. So this thing really makes it pretty rad. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty awesome. I think maybe they could improve it. Maybe not make that body out of aluminum, or at least the inside part where those counter bores are. But, you know, it's already saving me a ton of time. So I gotta recommend it. It's a pretty cool tool, and that's the Valve Master tool. And this one's specific to 6mm valves and the 1.8T really. I think they say it works on a lot of European cars with 6mm valves, but this little spacer fits perfect in the exhaust valve, and without it, that fits perfect in the intake valve. So it's pretty cool. So I'm going to keep going here, and should have this head assembled before I leave here today. Alright guys, so I might have spoke a little too soon on this guy. Literally, right after I started trying to show you guys, this thing started giving me a whole bunch of problems. I don't necessarily think it's the tool though. I do think it is how well you keep the valves held up in the combustion chamber. If they get pushed down at all with the tool or while you're pressing that valve spring down, it seems like the keepers just can't get far enough down to seat in the grooves. So what I've had to do is, I did finish up the rest of the exhaust valves, but I've had to basically double up the amount of the rags that I put in the cylinder, and I'm doing only one at a time, and then I'm having to unclamp this thing and move it over, and it's a little bit harder. I might think about maybe 3D printing some pieces that could hold the valves up, maybe. Or you could maybe, use some sort of a 2-part epoxy or like a 2-part silicone to like basically cast something that you could stick in that combustion chamber so that it holds those valves up tight to the valve seat. Because it becomes a real pain when you're trying to get these in and the valve goes down at all. It just won't set those keepers. So I'm going to start trying to go on the intake valves here and see if it does any better. I have this first cylinder completely packed with those blue towels, and hopefully that's enough to hold them up far enough to where these keepers will seat. So valve spring, retainer, and then gotta load this guy again. When it works really good. When it doesn't work, it's a real pain because it won't set the keeper all the way in, but it also doesn't let the tool come back out. So it kind of gets you jammed up in there, and basically you got to pull the thing apart and either keep trying to set it, but if the keeper gets too screwed up, it's not going to happen. So you got to pull this thing apart again, and then send the other end back down in there to pull the keepers back out and start over. So it's definitely not perfect. But like I said, I think that the tool works okay. I just think it's how well you hold those valves up. So let's give one of these intake valves a try and see how it goes. Yeah, that seated that one all right. I think sometimes you just kind of got to wiggle it a bit, and hopefully it kind of lets those keepers kind of wiggle down in there and seat themselves in the groove. So we'll try another one, see how it goes, and keep it going here. I'm kind of being cautious to make it so that the keepers are kind of on the sides this direction, since the valve's at a little bit of an angle, so they're kind of fall in the same way. I'm thinking maybe if they're this way, maybe this one's going in and this one's not, or vice versa. So I'm trying to kind of clock them in a way where they kind of go in the same. We'll see if it helps. didn't drop them in. Yeah, so it's definitely not a perfect science, I'll tell you that. So I don't know. I mean, it's still easier than doing it by hand, but it's definitely not perfect. There, it finally went. So a little bit of wiggling and it seems to go. You know, I don't know if maybe there's a better version of this out on the market. This is just the one I found when I was looking, and I don't know, it works okay, but yeah, it's not perfect. Nice thing about these Volkswagen keepers is that once they're in, you can definitely tell they're in right, because they basically have no gap between the keeper, between the two halves. So you can definitely tell if it's right or not. Some keepers have a pretty good gap, and makes it kind of hard to tell if they're in right side up or upside down. So it's like maybe a tool like this would be, you know, hard. You might want to do them by hand just to make sure they're in right. That's kind of what I'm saying. So that one went right in. So it's hit or miss. It works pretty well sometimes, not so well other times. I do definitely think it helps to have the cylinder or the combustion chamber packed really well with something so that valve can't move at all. I'll show you here. So that's what I've got in there. It's kind of like you can see the valve prints on it. But it was packed pretty densely in there, and plus has the weight of the head holding it in there, and I think that's definitely helping. I mean, you can see that the head's rocking on top of it. That's how much pressure it has. So it's you definitely need to hold those valves up. I think that's key to making the tool work better, but like I said, still not perfect. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to finish assembling this thing, and then we're probably going to get into some cleaning up the buckets, so the hydraulic lifters. Hydraulic lifters don't really go bad, they just get dirty. So we're going to go through how to properly clean those and reuse them. All right, so that's it. They're all in. The intake valves did seem to go quite a bit easier than the exhaust valves. That might just be because I figured out that I need to hold those valves up tighter. So, I mean, still a really cool tool. Not perfect. What is? It definitely saved me some time once I kind of figured out the idiosyncrasies of it. But yeah, that head's assembled. So we'll be moving on to doing some of the cleaning of the lifter buckets. So a bunch of nice valves and titanium retainers. This should give us about an 8,500 RPM rev limit. With keeping with the hydraulic lifters, just by going to the better valves and retainers. I don't think we'll need those kind of revs with this motor, because it'll probably fall on its face long before that, just due to turbo size and things like that. but the engine will be capable of it. And the more important thing is that if I ever want to swap cams to something that's got more lift or whatever, I don't have to pull the motor apart again. I can just change the cams out. So don't have to take the head off again, all that stuff. So always a good idea to do valve springs and retainers on a performance build, even if you're not doing cams. Just due to that, you have better cyclic rate, so you can get a higher RPM rev limit without floating a valve. Plus, you have a little bit more pressure on the spring, less reciprocating mass because of the titanium retainer, which all equates to being able to rev the thing a little more. So good idea, and then you still have the option to upgrade cams. So I do that to pretty much any motor I put together, even if I'm not putting cams in it. I think I said that before in another video. But yeah, it's just kind of a good idea to do to not have to take the thing down again. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this thing up, keep it clean, and put all this stuff away, and then we'll get into cleaning some lifters.